The market sets the price, not your feelings about your kitchen renovation.
People cling to whatever they want to hear.
Yeah.
Maybe their neighbor's home sold for crazy dollar. That doesn't mean that's what you're going to get.
Even though it's still a favorable market for sellers, you still have to know what you're doing. Should the seller care more about a realtor's compensation or care more about what their net is going to be on the closing day?
You need to interview real estate agents.
I'm Jenna Halverson, and I'm a real estate expert here in Kansas City Metro, specializing in Johnson County, and this is the Living Local podcast. Today, I'm super excited because we're going to be talking about selling homes and what the current landscape looks like for people that are looking to sell their home here in the near future. And I'm joined by a very special guest today, the one and only Mr. Andy Blake. Andy, welcome.
Thank you, Jenna, for having me.
Yes. Andy and I work together, and Andy's the leader of our group, which proudly has closed over $100 million in real estate in 2024 and was also just announced as, the 11th top? 11 top team in the Metro. So he is a wealth of knowledge. But yes, welcome. Tell us a little bit about how long you've been in real estate and your why. So why you got into real estate and why you've managed to stay in it this
Good question.
years.
I am going on year 18, 17, 18.
Okay.
Got in at 22. Had no clue what I was doing. Originally, I got in the business to do flips, rentals, investment stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be a realtor. I didn't like realtors, if I'm being honest. But I kind of stumbled into a crazy buyer's market, opposite of what we're in today.
Mm-hmm.
Getting out of college, people are buying their first home, tax credits, and it just kind of slowly stumbled into real estate. I still do investing today,
Mm-hmm.
but it was helping a buddy here and there. Then I helped his parents, and it just slowly turned into, 14 of us.
Yeah.
17 years later.
Yeah.
So
amazing. And I think also Andy's good proof that this is it's a relational business.
Yes.
You're not a social media star.
That is
This is
correct.
a little out of
That
your
is
comfort
correct.
zone. So we're happy to have you here today to share
Happy
your
to be
wealth
here.
of knowledge. But I wanted to bring Andy in because he does the bulk of the listings for our team. And really, he's an expert. And I think a big part of that is process and just, again, having all of the experience and knowing what it takes to get a house sold. So we're going to jump in it today. But I wanted to start because I was just reading this quote the other day, and I thought this was kind of jam-packed and set kind of a good tone for what it looks like in stepping into a seller's home and having a listing appointment. And this is from Chris Smith. He's a real estate marketing expert. But he said, your home is worth what a buyer will pay today, not what your neighbor got last year, not what Zillow says, or what you need to make your next move. The market sets the price, not your feelings about your kitchen renovation. But Andy, does this quote kind of hit home at all?
I love it. I tell people all the time, it's you don't get to pick the price. I don't get to pick the price. The market is going to pick the price.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think people cling to whatever they want to hear.
Yeah.
Maybe there's estimates high. Maybe their neighbor's home sold for crazy dollar. That doesn't mean that's what you're going to get.
Absolutely.
So.
And I think that's a big thing too, is you have to sometimes remind sellers of this, but they don't hire a realtor to come in and agree with their pricing or just come in to flatter your home. They
Right.
hired a professional that will get the job done.
Some
and
do.
Sell their home. Some do.
That's not their intention, but some do.
Yes. So what I want to talk about today is, so again, as professionals in the real estate industry in Kansas City, what does it look like and what's the landscape for selling a home? So we talked a little bit about this the last couple times in terms of what does the market look like in Kansas City, and more specifically kind of boiling it down in Johnson County. But we're still in a seller's market. And really, to just bring that down to the most basic level, there's more buyers to buy than there are homes to sell.
Yeah.
We talked about our inventory a little bit the last time. We're at about 1.8 months of supply, which basically means that's how many months it would take for buyers to buy the amount of inventory there is. A balanced market is typically closer to 6 months of inventory, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. So prices also continue to steadily rise here in Johnson County. Right now we're up about 7% year over year. And I think that's interesting because I do feel like the media still kind of misconstrues that a little bit. I feel like the media has made it sound like the market's been a bit more unstable and we haven't seen prices appreciating, but we're in a pretty steady market and have been and will continue to be, it looks like, moving forward into the year. Would you agree with
Yes.
that?
I think we need to kind of redefine what a seller's market
Okay.
is. I think what we're coming out of is like an extreme seller's market. So,
Mm-hmm.
so the hot COVID market is what we call it. But like the 2022, 2023, that was a seller's market. That was just as far of a seller's market as I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what I'm seeing day to day is trying to get sellers to understand we're in a seller's market, yes, but it is not what it once was. It's
Yeah.
still good to be a seller. But I just think that became the norm. Like I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of realtors, I mean, even we were guilty of it too, all got kind of fat and happy of everything we listed sold immediately.
Yes.
And people think that's the norm.
Mm-hmm.
So I think now, whether it's talking to sellers, talking to agents in the office, I'm trying to reset expectations. All of a sudden, I am the old guy. I was the young guy for a long time in my career. Now I'm the old guy. I don't know if we'll ever see that ever again.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is a healthy seller's market. It's not an extreme seller's
Yeah.
market, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
an extreme seller's market, we always would joke. It's like you put metal in the front yard and it's sold. You
Doesn't
can
matter.
tell your clients,
Yeah.
hey, go away for 24 hours,
Yep.
come back Sunday, and I'll have 10 offers for
Yes.
you to choose from. So,
Mhm.
yes, what went from kind of extreme hot, still hot, but it's
Yes.
not those types
And I'm
of
trying not
crazy
to be a Debbie
turns.
Downer to a seller. No,
Yeah.
I'm trying to be realistic and set
Absolutely.
expectations because I'm
Absolutely.
seeing too many sellers who that's the assumption,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't have to do the painting or the carpet, and then they're really disappointed.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to gauge their expectation because I think so many people are still stuck in 2022,
Absolutely.
and I think agents are too. I think
Yeah.
there's plenty of times we've made offers on listings
Yeah.
that we think is a pretty fair offer, and they will sit on it for days
Mm-hmm.
because they're assuming they're going to get 10 more.
Yeah.
So I think trying to get everyone on the same page, that's the challenge I think we have as pros
Yeah.
to our clients and other agents we work with.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so that's kind of what we wanted to talk about and kind of, drill down in today. Like, even though it's still a favorable market for sellers, like you still have to know what you're doing,
Mhm.
and you still have to prepare the house to have a quick and efficient sale. I like your kind of one-liner you always tell your sellers, which is you want to net them the most money.
You should know this by now. Yes.
Two
goals for
net
every
the
seller.
most money and at the least amount of
Make this as
headache.
Painless as possible. Yes, those are the two goals.
It repeats himself a lot. So there's all these little one-liners. But so I want to talk through that, kind of starting with how do we determine what somebody's house is worth and why is pricing right from the start so important? So you get a call to go on a listing appointment. What are you going to come equipped with when you go meet with that seller?
I'm a creature of habit.
Mhm.
I'm always going to have a market analysis of their home.
Okay.
I spend quite a bit of time on that. Like
Mhm.
if what's been going on in the neighborhood, I try to stick to their subdivision,
Mhm.
similar, size, layout, all the things. I bring information on our team of kind of what we do. And I bring I kind of have my dog and pony show of my presentation. It's fairly quick,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to set the expectation. I can't say that enough.
Yeah.
But I want them to know that I care. And I think the preparation is a big part of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Um,
So where are you getting that pricing information when you're saying, hey, here's a market analysis and what I think your home's worth?
yep.
Where is that data coming
This is
from?
what I think is going to net you the most money.
Yeah.
I'll talk about what I think it's worth too, but like that's kind of my goal is this is where I think you should be,
Mm-hmm.
like condition wise, price wise, to
Mhm.
net you the most money.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming that's their number one goal. I
Yeah.
have some sellers that naturally I think we always go to, they want the most money. And,
Yeah.
and I agree with that. I have other situations where maybe it's a death in the family, or maybe it's a divorce, maybe it's a job transfer. Like sometimes the timing, and that's why it's important to ask too, Jenna,
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Seller, what's the most important thing to you guys?
Yeah.
As opposed to always jumping straight to price.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so as it gets to price, I know one thing you get a lot, and we always talk about seller that comes in, they're like, hey, I think I know what it's worth. I
Yes.
read it on Zillow.
Yes.
Or I got
Love
my
that.
tax appraisal.
Yes.
So are those things that are those credible sources for what your home's worth?
They're a ballpark.
Okay.
I've used the comparison to Kelly Blue Book a little bit. Like, I've got Jenna drives an Acura.
Yeah.
And it's whatever year it may be. What's it worth? Well,
Yeah.
I think you can get a ballpark figure. But what Zestimates don't do, or even tax value, they don't go inside your house.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know how updated and clean. So I'm very careful with those figures. It is funny because some people, they call and they're mad because their tax value went up and they pay more taxes. Other people call and are mad because it went down.
Yeah.
Which is funny. Like I said earlier, we don't pick the price. The seller doesn't, the agent doesn't, the market's going to set the price. So
Absolutely.
I think it's okay. Naturally, every seller looks at Zillow. They want to see what that is.
Mhm.
I just don't think that carries much weight at all.
Absolutely.
I would almost say within a 10% range.
Okay.
This is a ballpark.
Okay.
But if your estimate says 700, maybe it's 770, maybe it's 630.
Yeah.
That's a pretty wide range, though, is what we're talking here.
Absolutely. Another thing too that came up and we deal with, and sometimes you'll see that marketed as, hey, like this is below appraisal value. So
Yeah.
you just had a situation where a seller
Yes.
had a third party appraisal and was
Yes.
really set on that number. And
Yep.
again, how did that work out in terms of, was that number accurate, or did that give them kind of a misconception of
No,
what the value
this
was?
is a good example. This goes back to the expectation thing. They called me, live in the neighborhood. I don't know these people at all. Randomly called me, hey, we want to talk to you about listing our home. We get down to price. I kind of gave them my price of, I think it was $550. I thought we should start. I felt pretty good
Mhm.
about that. Well, all of a sudden they bring out this stack of papers. Andy, we actually have an appraisal done. We had before they called me, which is rare. They paid $600 for a third party appraiser to come give them an appraisal.
Mhm.
That appraiser says it's worth 600. So the second they heard that is immediately
Yes.
what they are banking
Yeah.
on. And so there I felt like I was,
Kind of an
playing tug
uphill.
of war with them on this
Mhm.
pricing thing. And to make a long story short, we had the home listed for a while. We eventually decided that they should take the home off the market and rent it. They didn't get anywhere near 600,
Mhm.
and push back on price. But in their mind, it was my fault,
Mhm.
But I was trying to explain to them an appraisal is one person's opinion.
Absolutely.
And we had probably 45 showings. No one was even remotely interested close to 600,000.
Yeah.
But that's a good example of, I do wonder if they never had that appraisal,
Mhm.
I don't think, one, their home would be sold now,
Mhm.
and they would have never wanted to start at this bananas high number.
Yeah. Well, I
So-
think it's a good reminder too, if you're out there as a seller, to be coachable, because ultimately at the end of the day, there's a lot of other factors, and your agent's going to come in and they're going to be working for you. And they, again,
Mhm.
want to see you net that highest number. And the hardest thing to do is kind of back yourself out of that. And
Yep.
that's where it's like you put a lot of time and thought into pricing because you only have one chance to make a first impression. So again,
I do.
overpricing
Yeah.
can scare away buyers.
Yeah.
Likewise,
And it did.
Yeah, and that's a great example
Yeah.
of that. And you had given the warning, you had all of the data to prove it, and had they
Mhm.
been a bit more coachable, probably have a different outcome there.
And I had to remind them, I want to net you the most money. And
Yeah.
that was always my intentions.
Mhm.
But pricing it, if we use their logic, we should list everything at $1 million.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
we make more money when they make more money. So
Mhm.
that is our goal too. But
Well, and I think another point to that, not only is there overpricing, but there's underpricing. And
yes.
I work with a lot of buyers, and I can't tell you how many times I've brought a really nice offer to the table that's overlisting with great terms, and they're like, well, the seller was expecting more.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, we're, 10,000, 15,000 over asking. What was the expectation that you set with your seller? Like, well, we thought if we just underpriced it, we'd automatically have this huge bidding war
Mhm.
too. So, again, I
And
think
now that becomes your problem with the buyer,
exactly.
because they didn't set the expectation.
Yeah, yeah. Or you get this just total frenzy and you have an unrealistic
Totally.
expectation. There was one of those a couple weeks ago. It was like, 50 offers or something crazy like that. It was way below what it should have been too. So again, you only get one chance for a first impression, and
Big
that's why
time.
that pricing is so important. But okay, so kind of going from pricing, secondary to
Yes.
pricing, you touched on it a little bit, would be the condition of the home. So like we
Yes.
said, in the golden years in 2020 where you really didn't have to do anything. I mean, you walk in and you'd see a
Yeah.
dirty house. You'd see a lot of stuff that like wasn't desirable, but the house was still going to sell. That's changed a lot. So tell me a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of the pace of the market for homes that are turnkey or homes that need work. Kind of what's
Mhm.
your thought on that?
Okay, so I do this is what's hard for people.
Mm-hmm.
There are still situations where it is like 2022.
Mm-hmm.
It's a dollhouse, it's priced right, it's a zoo. You will get the pile of offers. But that is just not always, that became the norm. And that's what everyone
Mhm.
thought when we say seller's market, that's what that means.
Yeah.
It doesn't. But I think now if your home is not, let's say it's a average or below, it can still sell quickly if it is priced accordingly.
Mhm.
And I think sellers, it's hard for them to remove the emotions from their house because they might love their paint color. They might love this. I'm trying to get them to remove themselves from it
Mhm.
and have a realistic expectation.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be, once again, I'm not trying to be negative Nelly when I meet with sellers. I'm trying to help them though. I don't think it's going to help them to just say, yep, Jenna, let's just throw the sign in the yard and we will be fine.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to coach them up. And I always remind people this is the hardest part of the process.
Mhm.
Moving stinks. We say that all the time.
Yeah.
We try not to say that because we're real estate agents, but the reality
Yeah.
is it stinks. But trying to give them a pep talk of let's kind of grit our teeth and get these little projects done. And this will make the listing process much shorter.
Yeah. So that's what we're kind of looking at. What are some of those projects? When you talk about kind of preparing for market, we're not
Yeah.
necessarily saying go do a full scale kitchen renovation,
Right.
but little things like curb appeal, kind of
Yep.
putting money where
Cleaning.
Yeah.
Like I know that's an easy thing to say.
Yeah.
And everyone's idea of clean is different. And you see it too. You walk
Yeah.
through a million homes. When you walk into a home that is clean and tidy and well kept, it kind of sets the tone.
Mm-hmm.
And I've used this a lot when talking to the team or other people. When you walk into a home that's been well maintained, that is clean, it's almost like you're buying a car with low mileage.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that you versus a home that has been kind of run into the ground.
Yeah.
It may not have a problem today, but you know there's more coming. Kind
Yeah.
of like a high mileage car. Cheesy example, but you get the idea.
Mhm.
It's hard for people. It's hard for people when you're living in a home with pets and kids
Yeah.
and life to have your home show ready like a model home. But the better you do at doing that, the shorter the process will take.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that's important there is like, that's not necessarily even the turnkey house. We always give you a hard
Yeah.
time because you have a knack for what we call the grandma special, which
Yes,
is
love them.
grandma's house, that's been perfectly maintained. You could eat
Yeah.
off of the white carpet in the living room, and it's not up to speed in terms of design, decor, aesthetic, but it's been super well maintained. And it's kind of funny because those houses, even though, again, they maybe don't look super glamorous from an MLS photo, those attract a ton of buyer attention, don't
Big time.
they?
Big
Yes.
time. And I like to put, this isn't always the case, but good rule of thumb, 2 big pools of buyers.
Mm-hmm.
I have the people that, I hope I don't offend anyone, the Johnson County Princess buyers.
Mm-hmm.
They want quartz countertops and white and new and updated. That's a
Yeah.
big pool of buyers.
Yeah.
And then the other big pool of buyers is maybe someone more like me and my wife were when we started buying houses. I want the grandma special.
That you can
I
make
want
your
the
own.
wallpaper. I want to go to the furnace room and she's got like 1,000
Yeah.
dates of mate servicing her furnace.
Yeah.
But I want to put my own spin on it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to pay, for the high end.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing a lot of people do is kind of get stuck in the middle.
Absolutely.
Like they've got a grandma house. Like, you know what? Maybe we should redo the floors, which is fine. But then it almost makes the wallpaper look that much more dated because it doesn't match.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hesitant to have people do a whole home remodel,
Mm-hmm.
but I think paint's okay. Mulch this time of year.
Yeah.
That kind of sets a tone. Cleaning, power washing, just decluttering
Yeah.
makes a world of difference.
Yeah.
But maybe think about that. If your home is updated throughout, awesome. If it's grandma's home, that's okay.
Yeah.
But just don't expect to compete against that.
Yeah. But there's a huge demand. There was one
Huge demand.
two weeks ago. It was a 375 Ranch, Overland Park. It was grandma's house.
Yep.
Showed my people. They already had 10 offers.
Yep.
Went cash, waived inspections and appraisal. And so my people are kind of like, well, but it's grandma's house. Like, yeah, but this is what people want. So it is, again, kind of helpful to put that in perspective because that does look a little different.
And I think in certain people, they don't want to lift a hammer. That's not really their
Yeah.
thing. But I do think the HGTVs of the world, people love the projects.
Yeah.
And they want to do their own thing. That's what we've always done.
Yeah.
So yes, total sucker for the wallpaper grandma's home.
Mhm.
But I would argue those are usually the best buys.
Yeah. Yeah. And then again, just the cleanliness factor. I mean, if you're
Totally.
working with our team, we're going to go through and help identify, hey,
Yep.
here's what we think you should get out. We
Yep.
need to get some stuff into storage or stack it in the garage, get it clean.
Yeah.
We're working a deal right now. And this was the cleanest house. It was really small. Everything was labeled. They were in little Tupperwares that said where everything was. And my people couldn't believe how cleanly it was. And they were
Yeah.
willing to pay a premium for
Yes.
a minimal amount of square footage because that house
It's rare.
showed so well. And again, was just turnkey ready
And
to
it
go.
sets the tone that person maintains their home.
Yeah. Because again, it's like if you see dirty baseboards or you see something else, you're thinking, well, they probably haven't had the
Yeah.
furnace service or
Yeah.
they haven't done some of those other things there as well.
No.
So
Dream sellers.
absolutely. So in addition, so we've got price, we've got condition. Let's talk a little bit about timing because I know you
Okay.
have a lot of thoughts having been in the industry as long as you have. Some of it's fact, some of it's opinion as well.
Okay. Yeah.
But like right now is kind of our, spring market, this is when the bulk of our inventory is coming on. I think today we had 250 houses or something on the market on a Thursday, which is pretty incredible. So kind of in prime time. But you have a lot of thoughts too on kind of when the right thoughts are for a family move and like a 2-story house versus a ranch. So tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, I use the joke a lot. I'm good at upsizers and downsizers, but I mean that. I help a lot of people like us with kids upsizing to their family home, and then I help a lot of people on the other end of life who been there forever and downsizing. But let's talk about the upsizers. I think there's a window of time for that market, and I usually tell people spring break to 4th of July. That is kind of the family move.
Yeah.
And it's almost gotten to like February to June. It's almost shifted up a little bit. If you are selling a 2-story home, you are most likely going to sell to a family. They are all timing the school calendar. So what I think old school real estate was always summer. Summer's the busy time. I would argue it's spring, early spring. It does feel like today's day and age, people get to summer, they're done. They're done with home shopping.
Yeah.
They're kind of vacation mode. But I've always said if you get to the 4th of July and you have a 2-story on the market, you are going to be caught with your pants down because I think the families are generally done.
Yeah.
Now, I'm specifically talking about the big 2-story, story and a half, the classic Johnson County family home. I think that now it doesn't mean you can't sell it when it's not in that window. I just think that is your opportunity. That's the hottest time of the year for that move.
Absolutely.
And I think those are the most seasonal.
Yes.
I think the downsizers, first-time buyer, maybe not quite as seasonal.
Yeah.
As you would see the 2 stories.
Absolutely. And we saw, again, we saw the kind of the ebbs and flows this year.
Yeah.
This fall was kind of a funny market. And again, people were still doing well. Typically there's less buyers out, but the buyers that are out that time of year are serious buyers. They're not just like looky-loos in November. They're usually people that have a reason and a motivation to move.
Yeah.
But I think you're right on, summer, not only is it busy, but part of that too is like, I think some of that's our fault. Realtors, they start to travel and have summer plans and stuff too, so things can kind of come to a halt. So a good reminder if you are, thinking about moving and have a family home, like this is the time to be consulting your real estate expert. Like this is the time to be getting your ducks in a row because that window is short. That window is ending quickly here.
And it doesn't mean you're toast.
Yeah.
But once again, we got to reset expectations. If you call me in August, you can't talk about your neighbor that sold in May.
Yes.
I just think it's something to consider. It's just a little bit different market at that point.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so one question that we're getting a lot, and there's been a lot of shakeup kind of with this year with the recent NAR settlement, a lot of questions in terms of what is it going to cost me as the seller to sell my home, and kind of why is it important to look at and have the ability to negotiate things. So one question that I have for you, and I thought this was a kind of a good way to look at it, is should the seller care more about a realtor's compensation or care more about what their net is going to be on the closing day?
Okay, love this question. I get this question a lot. I'm prepared. First of all, if someone's asking that question, that means they're interviewing me.
Yeah.
Which I'm going to look at the camera for this because this is my pitch to the public. You need to interview real estate agents. I'm frustrated with the lack of, I guess, professionalism. Like, I think everyone thinks a realtor is a commodity. Like, you know what? My best friend just got their license, or my sister's friend, or I feel an obligation to use my family member. I respect that. I understand that. But I do think when you're selling a home, especially getting out of the extreme seller's market, like who you work with matters. But if going back to your original question, if your goal is to find the cheapest real estate agent, I think you're asking the wrong questions. And I think people feel really, really good when they feel like they get a deal, almost like, no different than buying something on sale.
Yeah.
But I like to, when they ask about my commission and what we charge, and if, so someone will do it for less. If your goal is the cheapest real estate agent, you are focused on the wrong things. You need to ask yourself, which one of these agents who I'm talking to is going to net me the most money? So I'm not dodging their question. I'm just trying to get them to, I guess, reconsider what their end game
getting
is.
for their money.
Totally. And what I've learned too is there's plenty of discount agents, and there's a place in the market for them. I'm not offended by them, and that's okay. They can absolutely do that. But I do think you get what you pay for. And I've seen too many people that say, you know what, I got beat up on commission, so I'm going to kind of give you the junior varsity version. We're gonna cut back on whether it's photos or marketing, or I'm not doing an open house. Like I'm doing that at a discount. So Of all the places to save money in your life, I know real estate agents aren't cheap. But the most expensive ones are the cheap ones, if that makes sense. That is going to hurt you. And especially in this market
Yeah.
where I do think the timing, like what you said, the one chance at a first impression, the first 7 days are critical. And I've had other people say, Andy, I really liked you, but we went with someone for some other reason. We need to help a family friend or whatever it
Yeah.
may be. And if it doesn't work out, we'll call you. Well, then they do call me.
Yeah.
And it's 30 days later, but we've lost
All the momentum.
And now, well, Andy, that you mentioned this price. I'm like, well, that ship sailed, So it's a tricky market, and it is a pros market right now. There's a lot of realtors who are slow, but the pros I'm talking, they're busy.
Yeah.
But I do think hopefully the days of just putting the sign in the yard and immediately selling are over, where I think people are taking it a little more seriously. If I need a pro, is hopefully coming back.
Yeah.
So interview agents.
Well, and I think too, like to that point, like trying to negotiate a couple $1,000s or something off on the front end ultimately
They're
could
missing the
lead
point.
to thousands of dollars lost. And part of that then comes down to in the negotiation skills. And
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that if you're only selling a house once a year, are you going to be a great negotiator? Are you going to understand the terms and conditions that the market's going to bear? Probably not. And I think
Right.
that's another thing you do really, really well, because the negotiation's not just the price. And I think that's another thing that sellers get really hung up on. But it's like, well, hold on, is this offer going to meet your desired closing date? Are they going to do inspections? Are they going to take it as is? But all of those things, again, you're asking your sellers, you made that point in the beginning, for not everybody is it just about the price. There's a lot of other things that go into that from a negotiation perspective. And again, that's just something that you're not going to be proficient in if you're not doing it day in and day out. So
it's kind of a game of logistics. Getting the home sold is step one of like 10. So I think there's lots of agents that can get your home sold. There's lots of them. But can they get you the terms that you want? Can they get you the timeline? Can they get you extra days of possession? Do they know how to handle inspection items? And then, okay, we do have to make repair. That's back now too. Like maybe we have to make
Good
some home
point.
repairs.
Yes.
We haven't done that in a while.
yes.
Do they have vendors that can help you do this? Like there's a lot more to, and I think a good realtor is a connector. They're kind of a network connector of I've got the plumber, I've got the mover, I've got the lender, I've got like the deal we're doing together. They're moving to Wichita. I have a friend in Wichita.
Yeah.
So I can connect them, and they were excited to have a very similar experience here in Wichita.
Absolutely.
So these are the questions that only come up when people interview and ask people what they do different.
Absolutely. Well, I think, again, just to kind of recap here, it's been important to kind of walk through this, but we've got a market, seller's market, still be prepared.
A healthy
seller market. I like that.
Yep.
Robust. We're still looking at the right pricing, the condition, again, and then just having an expert that works for you. So to kind of summarize that, I would say the best point to make is who you work with matters. It's easy to be a realtor. It's hard to be an excellent one.
Yep.
This was another little stat that you had pointed out yesterday that I think is interesting, but it's like roughly 80% of sellers, when they go to sell their house, they're selling it with a different agent than the agent that they bought the house with. And I think that's compelling because what does that mean? Like those agents are selling them a house and then they're never hearing from them again. And so, again, that kind of plays back into what are you doing to cultivate and to sow into your client base and your network?
And that may be a really wild statistic for the public, but not to real estate agents.
Yeah.
It is a high turnover business. I think this was from The Economist. Misty Freilich had this statistic, the 80% rule.
Yeah.
So 5 out of 6 people that buy with an agent do not use the same agent to sell.
Absolutely. So to summarize it, Andy, thank you for being
You bet.
here today. I appreciate you. Again, your wealth
Happy to
of
do it.
knowledge. Andy and I both work with buyers and sellers. We would always love to get our team connected with you. So reminder to not use a part-time agent when you're stepping into buying or selling. You always want to be with a professional. Interview your agent. If you're in Kansas City area, we hope that you'd give us a call. So shoot us a note if you'd like to connect. And thanks again for joining us. Andy, thanks for being here.
You bet.